What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we have another very exciting deck list to talk about with you. We're going to be talking about Ruby Sapphire Control, how to play it, how to play against it, touching on some of those topics. I know this is a deck that is incredibly prevalent in a lot of people's local metas. A lot of people have a hard time playing against it, and a lot of people that may want to play the deck have a hard time with what the play lines should be. It's a kind of complicated deck to play, so we're going to be going over that today. If you enjoy seeing some more meta type deck lists, definitely make sure you're slapping that like button. That lets me know what kind of videos to bring to you guys going forward. As always, a big shout out to the Patreons for making the giveaways on the channel possible. You guys are the real MVPs. Could not do any of this without you. So as always, give a shout out to the Patreons in the comments. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into talking about today's Ruby Sapphire list. So the first card in the 1-drop slot, we're going to be jumping in with some items, is going to be Vitalis Spere, a 1-cost inkable item, 1 to banish it, and chosen character is going to get rush and +2 this turn, which is really super good with anything that doesn't have rush, and the +2 is certainly not irrelevant in a meta where locations definitely exist. Vitalis Sphere is a really good card. It doesn't let you draw a card like Popsicle, but still one of the better items you can play. Maui Shark made it even better to be able to challenge and bring an action back from your banish pile. Next up, we are on 3 Iceblock, a 1-cost uninkable. All you have to do is exert it, and chosen character is going to get -1 strength this turn. Great for taking more favorable trades. Also fantastic with both of the Cesus as well as Brawl to be able to lower something's strength into a range where it can be removed, and it's an item. Next up in the 1-cost slot still, we are on 4 Popsicle, a staple item since it released. Fantastic with Hiram Flaversham. It is a 1-cost inkable item. It's going to come down and immediately replace itself by letting you draw a card. Fantastic in and of itself, and does have banish, remove 2 damage from chosen character, which can be good if you need to heal something, if that is more relevant than banishing it to something like Hiram to be able to draw the cards. But typically you're going to want to be on that Hiram play line to get some additional card draw out of it. But just replacing itself immediately is already really good. That's probably your optimal turn 1 play with this deck. Speaking of optimal plays, turn 2 we're looking at Tomo, Growing Sun, a 2-cost inkable 1/2 stat line questing for 1. Probably your optimal turn 2 play with this deck, as it is going to let you ink uninkables with its ability Measure Me Again. When you play this character, you may put a card from your hand into your inkwell face down and exerted. So this is going to work like Fishbone Quill in that it is going to let you ink those uninkables. So this is primarily where you want to be on turn 2. Mulliganing for this is definitely important. You are on 18 uninkables with this deck, so inking uninkables is definitely something you'd like to be able to do. Next up in the 2-cost slot, we are on 2 Queen of Hearts, Impulsive Ruler, a 2-cost inkable 2/2 stat line questing for 1. Obviously stuff like Daisy Duck did make it a little less effective, but if you have something you need to trade with, your opponent isn't expecting that Queen of Hearts, she can be really good. She trades quite well into things like Bonsai, which is a 3/2 going to quest for 2, so being able to get that favorable trade with Queen of Hearts is going to be a really good option. That's primarily what Queen of Hearts is here for you. She's not really doing anything else in those matchups where she's not going to be able to do that effectively. You're just going to ink her. Next up in the 2-cost slot, we are on 1 Hideway, just an action, not a song. Put chosen item or location into its player's inkwell face down and exerted. So this is going to give your opponent a little bit of ramp, but you should be ramping enough that that's really not going to matter. And when they have an item or location that's really messing you up, this is going to help you hugely. It is primarily here to deal with those locations like Queen's Castle, and as we saw in that finals, a continental matchup, those libraries, which can be very aggressive. Also, 7 Dwarfs Mine has become super relevant in the current meta. If you're seeing a ton of those type of decks in your local meta, I'd almost say go to 2 Hideaways. And continuing forward, we do have 3 Vision of the Future, a 2-cost inkable action. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put 1 into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. Fantastic way to dig. It's going to let you dig into that deck super deep, super quickly, and be able to grab the most important cards out of it while getting rid of the cards that you may have not wanted to draw into anyway. Sometimes you'll hit 2 cards you would have really liked to have, and that is the luck of the draw with this card, but being able to dig 5 cards deep for 2 ink that you're probably going to have available as erroneous ink is really good. Next up, we are on 4 Sail the Azurite, a 2-cost inkable action. This is your backup to Tomo. This turn, you are going to be able to put an additional card from your hand into your inkwell face down. It is not going to let you put a card that is uninkable into your inkwell, so it does have to be an inkable card. Keep that in mind. So if you're digging for something that you want to ink and you don't want to ink in your hand, ink something that's in your hand, it may not be the best time to play it. Like I mentioned, this deck is on 18 uninkables, so the likelihood of you drawing an inkable that you may also want to keep, or an uninkable from the top of your deck that you're not going to be be able to ink with Sail the Azurite Sea is high. So if you have something additional in your hand you want to get rid of, that's probably going to be the best time to play Sail the Azurite Sea. Next up, jumping over to the 3-cost slot and our only 3-cost character, we are on 2 Cesu Daring Visitor, a 3-cost uninkable 1/1 evasive. But when you play this character, banish chosen opposing character with 1 strength or less. Like I mentioned with those ice blocks, you can reduce the strength of your opposing characters and then still go ahead and take it out on Cesu. Take it out with Cesu. I know it is a 3-cost, but in most matchups, it's not necessarily something you're going to be looking to do on 3. Typically, what you're going to be looking to do is going turn 1 item, turn 2 ramp card, turn 3 you're going to have 4 ink at that point and get Hiram down, banish the item, and start drawing. Then Cesu will come in subsequent turns. Speaking of cards you're not going to be playing on 3 unless you have to, we are on 4 Brawl, a 3-cost inkable action, banish chosen character with 2 strength or less, like I already mentioned with the Cesus, reducing your opponent's characters with the ice block, and then brawling them is going to be the optimal play line. Jumping over to the 4-cost slot, we are on 2 Grandma Tala, Keeper of Ancient Stories, a card some people have cut in its entirety or still play a play set of 4 of. It's really kind of hit and miss what people are doing with this card in Ruby Sapphire. I think it's still really good, at least as a 2 of, but it is a 4-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 1. I think its stat line's a little weak, but its ability is really good in that when you play this character, look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You may put 1 in your hand and 1 on the bottom of your deck. So it's going to let you, again, dig a little bit deeper into your deck and potentially put another resource in your hand. It is letting you draw a card as well, so it's effectively replacing itself as soon as you play it. Speaking of cards that let you dig into your deck, we are on 4 Hiram Flaversham Toymaker, a 4-cost inkable 1/6 stat line, questing for 1 with when it comes into play, and whenever you quest, you may banish an item you control to draw 2 cards, which is crazy that it's doing it when it comes into play and when it quests. I saw at one point that they were considering potentially altering this card according to some changes we saw online. I think the stat line changed, as well as the ink cost maybe, or I'm pretty sure it was the ink cost was higher and the stat line was worse. But none of those things ever happened. Hiram has stayed the same. He has stayed unerrated. Obviously, there was a lot of backlash when they errated Bucky, but that's beside the point. Hiram Flaversham is still a very good card, going to let you draw a ton of cards if your opponent isn't ready to deal with it, and that 1/6 stat line is going to make it really difficult for most opposing decks to deal with. Obviously, Brawl deals with it pretty handily, but if you're going up against anything steel, even their Along Came Zeus isn't going to quite take out your Hiram. Next up in the 4-cost slot still, moving over to the 1 action we're playing there, we are on 4 How Far I'll Go, a 4-cost uninkable action song. So you can sing it with those Hirams if you have no items out. You can sing it with those Talas. You can sing it with anything that costs more than that. And look at the top 2 cards of your deck. Put 1 into your hand and the other into your inkwell face down and exerted. This is another instance of a card that is going to let you ink uninkables, which is hugely important to a deck that is playing more than 16 uninkables. So How Far I'll Go is going to be really good, and being able to sing it is just going to make it that much better. It's going to ramp you an additional ink going into that turn 5. However, if you're on that ramp on turn 2, getting a 4-cost down on turn 3, you're potentially singing this on turn 4 and ramping up to 6 ink by turn 4 of the game, which is a little bit crazy. It means you're going into turn 5 with 7 ink, so you're already ahead by 2, and just probably going to start to steamroll the game from that point forward. Next up, jumping over to the 5-cost slot, we're on 2 Maui Hero to All, a 5-cost inkable 6/5 stat line with Rush and Reckless. There's not too much that needs to be said about Maui. He's been a staple in the meta for a long time. He is going to absolutely decimate any character that gets in his way. Exerted, there's very few things that don't die to Maui. Jumping over to the 6-cost slot, we are on 3 Madame Medusa, the Boss, a 6-cost uninkable 4/4 stat line questing for 1, and when you play this character, banish chosen opposing character with 3 strength or less. And not to sound like a broken record, but with those ice blocks, obviously, again, you can make characters weaker, and Madame Medusa is just going to get even more value. So these cards, Medusa, Brawl, Cesu, the other Cesu, they all really shine in a deck with ice block. The only other 6-cost character in the deck is going to be 3 Maui Half Sharks, a 6-cost inkable, crazy that this card is inkable, 7/5 stat line questing for 1 with evasive, somebody thought that was fine. I don't know if anybody ever looked back at Mickey BLT when they come up with the new evasive cards. Like, that card is extensive, is like essentially terrible now. It quests for 4, it's a 5/5 stat line, it costs 8. You look at things like Maui that are 7/5, only quests for 1, but it costs 6. And then you start looking at its abilities. Whenever this character challenges another character, you return an action card from your discard in your hand. Yeah, let's just play Be Prepared extra times. And whenever you play an action, gain 1 lore. So pretty cracked combination of abilities with Maui Half Shark. Moving over to the 1 6-cost action, we are on 1 A Pirate's Life, a 6-cost inkable action song, Sing Together 6, a mechanic we haven't seen return since set 4. So hopefully we'll see some new Sing Together cards going forward. And each opponent loses 2 lore and you gain 2 lore. I know we're all excited about the multicolor cards, but let's make the push for more Sing Together cards. But this card, opponent loses 2 lore, you gain 2 lore. Going to be a great way to take tempo back in those matchups where you're going against something like aggro and they're really close to winning as it is. Also, with something like Maui Half Shark being able to challenge and bring this back, you are still potentially going to be able to play it more than once, even though you only have 1 in the deck. And Maui Half Shark, if he doesn't have another thing to challenge, can sing this. So can Medusa. So keep that in mind. Next up, we are on 2 Be Prepared, a 7-cost uninkable action song, Banish all characters, Wrath of God of Lorcana. Going to get everything off the field, clear it, clean slate. It's not going to deal with locations. So if you are in a location heavy meta, choose wisely how many of these that you play. If you're not in a location heavy meta, maybe play more. But a lot of decks are playing at least some locations currently. Jumping over to the 8-cost slot, we're on 2 Tamatoa, a card that this deck has seen flex in and out for Ruby Sapphire. Like, these lists have been on 1 Tamatoa, 2 Tamatoas, 3 Tamatoas, 4 Tamatoas, and it all depends on the state of the current meta. I don't think Tamatoa is as necessary as it used to be. We've seen some decks, since they're not running Lucky Dime anymore, not play Tamatoa at all. So there is that option. I still think Tamatoa is really good in the late game to be able to cycle back some of those items. If nothing else, if he's not questing for a lot, he's just a big body that's going to take some removal to deal with, or potentially take something out in a challenge, even if he's not getting those quests in. And when he is questing, not only are you potentially getting that additional lore, but you're getting those items back and able to start cycling those popsicles to get some additional card draw and just really keep your foot on the gas. But Tamatoa is so shiny, an 8-cost inkable 5/8 stat line, questing for 1. When you play him and whenever you quest, you get to bring an item back from your discard to your hand, and this character gets +1 lore for each item you have in play. Super good. The other 8-cost character we're playing in the deck is going to be 4 Cesu Empowered Sibling, an 8-cost uninkable 5/4 stat line, questing for 3, shifting for 6. So as I mentioned, you can get to that 6 ink by turn 4 of the game. It's not going to be 6 usable ink at that point. You'll be looking at going into turn 5. Still, turn 5, getting the Cesu down and clearing the field can be definitely soon enough to deal with things like aggro. When you play this character, banish all opposing characters with 2 strength or less. So she's just going to absolutely clear your opponent's side of the field. One-sided Be Prepared. Bonus points if you have those ice blocks to reduce the characters that have more than 2 strength to 2 strength, so that they can be banished as well. And the very last card of the deck, the tip of the iceberg so to speak, is going to be 2 Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, a 9-cost inkable 7/5 stat line. So very good stat line, questing for 2. When you play this character, you may banish chosen character. Any character on the board, as long as it doesn't have ward, is not safe from Maleficent Dragon. You can go ahead and banish it. So definitely a great card to play. Obviously, if you're drawing it in the early turns or even the mid turns of the game, a lot of times not going to be super relevant to you because you're probably not going to have the 9 ink. This deck used to get to 9 ink a lot more cleanly with things like Fishbone Quill, and doing so used to play more Maleficent Monstrous Dragons. Now a lot of the lists are reducing the amount of these. Still very good cards. Targeted removal against anything regardless of its strength can be super relevant to what you're trying to do in the late game. But that being said, that is the breakdown on the Ruby Sapphire list. That is the 60 cards I think are potentially the best to play right now for Ruby Sapphire to deal with the matchups that you are potentially dealing with. If you're playing Ruby Sapphire, hopefully this helped you to play it a little more effectively. If you're playing against Ruby Sapphire, hopefully this helped you to play against the deck a little more effectively and know what their play lines are going to look at, so you can tech to that deck list accordingly. If you enjoyed this breakdown, drop a like on the video, it helps us out a ton. Throw a comment down there if you've been playing this deck list and you think this is the optimal 60 cards to play, or if you're playing something different, I always love to hear it. But thank you as always for sticking around to the end, and when you see those toys, video games, and big ol' Cesus off in the distance clearing the board, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.